Hi, everyone. We are here with our first official episode of season 10 of the Ciertos podcast. So excited to kick off this episode with something a little bit different. I'm inviting a guest here who I've known for a while and who is in a new adventure, new position, new space to really talk to us about the Heritage Museum of Epirus. Maria, take it away, introduce yourself, and we'll get started.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited. So, behind me, you can see a few costumes. I'm here today at the Heritage Museum of Epirus. We are located in Astoria, New York. We are in New York City, we're the only institution that's dedicated to Greek culture and heritage exclusively, and really one of very few institutions that exist like this here in the United States. So, I'm working with the museum currently as their curator. So, I'm helping them develop events and programs and things of that nature. Just a little bit about the museum. It's connected to the Society of Epirotes Anagenesis and the Lady Suliotises that has been in existence for a while here in New York. In around the 80s and especially in the 90s, a group of people led by Mr. Kosovitsas, who was the president at the time, really wanted to find something to do with all of the items that them and their ancestors had brought over to the United States from Epirus. So they began collecting items of cultural importance, of importance for their families, and they slowly began building a collection. So here we now have a collection of about 600 to 800 items, including costumes, jewelry, agricultural materials, things of that nature. And they created this museum. Was grand The grand opening was in 2003. Recently they renovated it in 21, 22 to make it a really state of the art facility. So you'll see we have lighting, we have cases, everything is really state of the art now. So they did a grand reopening back in 2022. So it's a really beautiful space that is kind of a secret of Greek heritage here in New York City.
That is so neat. And what a really cool idea and like some great forethought that these people had to think about like we have these beautiful treasures and things that are in our family and maybe we don't use them today but we want to preserve them. So can you talk a little bit about that, like if somebody had some things at home that they didn't know what they were used for, they didn't know where they could go, how would they go about maybe even seeing if they could lend them to the museum or donate them, or what's that process?
Absolutely. So we have kind of an existing collection that was donated by mostly members, as I mentioned, of the society. So we have something that's so unique about our museum is that so many of these pieces come with stories. Like we have someone's wedding dress that was actually worn together with a picture of the person that wore the wedding dress, which kind of makes us stand apart in a way from some of the museums you might go visit in Greece that are dedicated to costumes and things of that nature. Whereas those are really focused on trying to understand kind of the canon of the Greek costume. For us, ours are really connected to stories and individuals, which is kind of makes us stand out. As far as future acquisitions, we're always open to hearing about that. We are really dedicated to Equitas, but we'd also be open to hearing if people had something great that they wanted to donate. So they would just reach out to us. I'll give you our email address and everything at the end for the podcast, but you could reach out to us and let us know, and we would just kind of take it from there and evaluate the objects and see if it was a good fit for a museum. Something really important in the museum world is just making sure that you are not taking on more objects than you're able to adequately care for. So we do have our established collection, and I think moving forward, our board is being, we want to make sure that we're able to care for the objects that we would accept into our museum.
Yeah. Well, and I think, knowing not really anything about this, it takes a lot to care for this stuff, like how they break down and the temperature of the rooms and like the air and stuff like that, right? Because what you have, even what you have behind you, that is, they're not new things, right? So there's delicacy to them in terms of like the materials and all that good stuff. So I love that there's so much of a focus on that and that there's a personal connection to it. Like you have picture of person wearing the dress. That's just a very different way to kind of view art and to view, I guess, like an artifact, you know? So cool.
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome. Um, so can you tell us about some of like your favorite pieces or something that you'd be able to show, while we're talking? I feel like before we went on air, you were telling me about some cool things that you have. And, now that we use video, it's like people can get a little bit of a glimpse into what the museum might have.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously you see the costumes behind me. Something we're really focused on for the 2025 now into 2026 year is bringing students into the museum for educational programs. And again, something really unique about our museum compared to within the grander landscape of New York is we have objects that have the personal connection, but we also have objects that we allow our visitors to touch and feel. So they kind of get that kind of sensory, interactive experience. One of my favorite, we have a few different educational programs, but one of my favorite things to talk about with the kids is this idea of the costume, right? A costume is kind of a word that doesn't really fit what we actually see because these weren't costumes really. These were what people wore on a day to day basis. And not only were they things that people wore, they were things that people made for themselves in order to wear. So it's kind of a foreign concept, I think, to a lot of our young people, our young visitors that we have in the museum who, they can shop on Amazon, Old Navy, Zara, wherever it is. And there's this instant kind of sense of gratification when it comes to costumes or clothing. But really, for hundreds of thousands of years in Greece and really all over the world, fabric was something that was created in the home. And Epirus is a really unique, it provides a unique lens to that because of their mountainous regions and the fact that they really needed to be aware of what they were wearing just to keep themselves warm in the cold climate that they were. So I'm sorry I'm talking a lot, but one of the
No, I
things
love this.
to show our kids is this,
So
which is something that you'll even see depictions of these on ancient Greek vases. It's how you would take wool and you would slowly pull it out to form the thread that then you would put onto a loom in order to create. So the people of Ipiros would, shear the sheep, shear their goats, whatever it was, and then they would have to wash it, and then they would have to dry it, and then they would have to wash it again. And then from there, then it slowly gets woven into this fabric, and then it gets woven into thinner thread, and then it turns into something like you might see behind me. So there's all these layers that really kids and adults, I would say, are not really aware of. So things like this, where kids can actually and adults feel and experience something is really great. And I love letting them just touch it and think of the difference between this material versus the clothing that they're wearing that day. Something else,
yeah,
we have a closet of costumes as well. And one of my other favorite things to do is to have them pick up one of their winter coats, right? Like we have these like pockets and they're kind of light, packable, all of these things. And then I invite them to hold the hanger with one of the costumes. And it's always like, this strong kid that volunteers, I got this. And he's like, whoa, that's heavy. But
yeah,
that's something really special that we have at our museum, this way to transport yourself to a different part of the world and even a different time within the history of Greece and specifically to the Epirus region.
yeah.
Really fun to showcase that here through our programs and things like that.
Yeah, I think that's so cool. I think it's like the tactile nature of that, and it makes it probably like, especially for people who are like high touch, which most kids are, right? If you say don't touch something, they're like, they want to touch it, but it just makes it so much more real to experience. And like, it's not just this thing that's behind glass or whatever. So I love that idea of like the weight of something, right?
Mm,
And even I think people who might have background in Greek dance or whatever probably understand that as well in terms of like when you actually put on like the stoli or like whatever you're trying to put on for performance and you're like, "My gosh, this is like so much," right? Yeah, it is.
right. So different. We're used to dressing for comfort and ease, and climate controlled spaces, which was not a thing for thousands of years.
Right, exactly, exactly. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. So, love the idea of bringing kids into the museum and the education initiatives. Is the museum's intent to bring or to cast a broad net, like, beyond just, and I don't mean just in that sense, but Greek schools? Like, are kids from all different schools coming over? Is that the plan to kinda share the culture that way?
So the museum's intent really is to preserve the heritage of Epirus and showcase the heritage of Epirus. And primarily right now in New York City, we have a broad network of Greek parochial schools. So we're kind of starting with those. We've also in the spring, we are anticipating, and they came last year as well. There's a college in Queens that has a Greek studies department, so they bring students here. I'm in conversations with some like design schools to see if they might be interested. There's really lots of opportunities for collaboration and really for inspiration. Even just looking at the details of the costume, I think is something that could be inspiring for not only students of Greek descent, but really anybody that's interested in the history of clothing and of dress.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I think that is so neat. I love when you go to, like, different shops and see things and you're like, "Oh my gosh, that reminds me of, like, this embroidery on this costume," or whatever, and whether it was intent or not, because, at some point in time, design just replicates itself, right, in some way, shape, or form, but I think that's so cool. Like, several episodes ago, we had somebody on and I don't know if this actually made it onto the show or if it was just when we were chit-chatting, we were saying how, like, we would love to wear, like, Greek folk costumes, but in a modern sense, like the patterning or the design work on, like, a blouse that you could, like, wear to work or whatever. So, I think that'd be so cool if somebody came to the museum and then designed something.
I mean, 100%. I mean, that is, a dream of all dreams, right? And interestingly, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, their gala this year is looking at the history of clothing. And one of the first images that they released was an ancient Greek statue, just like a bust of a woman in kind of what's called a Hamatian, Imatio, depending on how you want to pronounce it, but just like a one of those simple kind of folks. It is, I'm interested to see where they decide to take that theme because maybe there you might see connections. And like you said, there is always connections when you look at the intricacies of design. And here in our museum specifically, Epidos has so much influence because it really was a cross grounds, right? Like they're on the water, they're in Northwest Greece, they're on the water and in the mountains. They have a lot of Ottoman influence for hundreds of years, even while they had a sense of autonomy. There's this richness, there's all these different kinds of fabrics. And something that I found really interesting since I started working here and really researching this specific region, a lot of times when you look at how historians and costume historians are dividing up Greek costumes, they put the costumes of Epiros with the costumes of the islands because they are so rich in their embroideries and in their pattern design. So it is always interesting to see. And to that extent, I think wearing something that was inspired or even was an ancient piece would be such a beautiful homage to our heritage and our culture.
Yeah. Oh, I did not know that the similarities or that people curate them in groups similar to islands. That's so neat. I've
Yeah,
never
there's
been to Ipiros, but
book and it is a book that I've been slowly kind of working my way through, and I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's titled "Embroideries of the Islands and Sepia." Like it's connected because
yeah.
there's so much uniqueness in the costumes that came out of this region. So there's a
That's
lot to see and
cool.
a lot to study.
Yeah, it's just so fascinating, and there's, a lot to be said about, like, how people through their, let's call this art, which we can, I think, can say,
Yeah.
classify it as this, display and demonstrate, like, the passage of their time or, like, what culture was like. Like, even just looking at what's behind you,
Mhm.
there's distinct differences in those pieces, right? So it's like, golly, like, what was the longer, like, tunic, with the red trim? Why would somebody wear that? Was it for this? Was it for that? There's just so much behind it. There's so many stories and connection. I think that's so cool.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Or even just what they would wear for a wedding, what they would wear on a daily basis, what they would wear for winter. There's so much to learn. And it really is just a different lens from our modern understanding of how we think of clothing. So it really is fascinating to put yourself out of the 2026 bubble and really transport yourself to a different through these costumes.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't even know that about the Met Gala either. I mean, I'm not really up on that kind of stuff, but that will be interesting to see what people end up wearing too, because it's always quite the show, you know? So, can you talk a little bit about your art background in terms of like what you studied, like how you found yourself in this role and sort of why it speaks to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So my background is in art history and museum studies. I studied art history and coincidentally Italian at the University of Virginia for undergraduate. I spent a lot of time in Italy doing archaeological excavations and things of that nature. Worked as a docent at the Art Museum at the University of Virginia throughout my study there. And then I have a master's in art history and museum studies from Boston University. And during my time there, I was working at the Museum of Fine Arts as well. So, really, the idea of the intersection between studying art history and how it's displayed in a museum, but really how it's interacted with in a museum or in any sense, when in a museum at an archaeological site, as you travel throughout Greece, for example, has always been something that's fascinated me. Because I find that too often people hear the word museum or walk into a museum and are immediately intimidated and they think that they can't experience something unless they know something. And it's something that really was a formative kind of idea in my approach, really throughout my career has been no, when you're looking at a piece of art, an object, there is really no wrong answer. Um, and my goal is to invite people to experience the things in front of them in that moment, right? We're never going to be able to fully understand the intention behind something, but we can use visual clues and we can use our own overlay of emotions. I want to invite that. So when I heard about this museum and I heard that they were looking for somebody to really help spearhead educational programming, this was, you know, a dream for me because I really, really enjoy that. I really enjoy bringing people into a space and having them not just look, right? Because a lot of times people are intimidated, like I said, by museums, even a modern art museum, a heritage museum, whatever it is, they see the glass and immediately they think, okay, I have to create space between me and that object. But my goal is to erase the space and ask them to just look and experience. And it's really, really fun with kids, especially because sometimes they haven't developed that fear to look yet or fear of being wrong yet that we as adults sometimes have. So I see this really as an opportunity to bring young people into contact with the heritage of Epirus, the heritage of Greece, but also to teach them how to experience art and how to experience a museum. So this has been really, really fun for me. And as we mentioned before, all of the details of the embroidery are such a great place to start. Sometimes I have the kids just walk around and sketch their favorite thing that they see. And every single time I'm surprised by the details that they pull out and they show me. So it's been really a great experience as far as that.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cute. I can just imagine like what they come up with and like it's almost neat to be able to see that from their mind's eye,
Yeah.
like jumps out to them. That's so neat. That's amazing.
And even for adults as well, we're piloting some open hours. As I mentioned, this is kind of a hidden gem here in New York City. So we're trying really hard to spread the word that this beautiful museum exists because the board and all of the previous iterations of the board and all of the people that have donated their costumes and their family's heritage, we want to really showcase that here in New York City and beyond. So we recently held an evening event that was honoring a specific group of women from Ipiros, the women of Suli, who lost their lives on a cliff. There's this famous dance that a lot of times we hear about, we learn in Greek school and Greek dance, but there's just a gravity there that, in contrast to kids' experiences, I wanted to showcase the gravity really of a specific moment of history of Epirus. So that night, for example, I was standing by the door with the president of the board, and we were watching people come in because it brought a new audience to the museum. There was, of course, people that have been here before, longstanding supporters, and then a new group of people kind of walked into the museum for the first time, and watching their eyes light up when they saw the space was so rewarding. And that's really what we want to do, is we want people to be able to come and experience a piece of Greece, a piece of Epirus. There was one woman here who was almost in tears because her dad was from Epirus and he passed away a few years ago. And they're getting ready to go and host a memorial service. And she was looking at the costumes and she's FaceTiming her family in Greece. And she's lived in New York for all these years, and this was her first time that she was able to really experience that. So really, museums exist and art really exists for connection. So I see myself and my role here kind of as a conduit to foster those connections.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. I have such a distinct memory as a kid doing a big play for Greek Independence Day, and we danced as, like, the women of Suli, and I remember, like, we were so young, like, 6th grade maybe, and it's like, how do you really explain that to, like, a kid, you know? It's still ingrained in my mind of, like, they were like, "Okay, when you get to this part of the stage, you're gonna fade off to the back because that's you jumping off the cliff," and, at that age, you're like, "Okay," you don't really know, but it's just so neat to be able to see that, how you're bridging and doing events for adults too, because I think what you described, that connection point, this is huge for people. I think being able to feel your heritage and what strikes me, and I've never been to the museum, but the fact that you have so many pieces there that have such strong personal ties, my guess is that a lot of maybe that emotion that you were picking up from people as they walked in was because they felt the personality, the history of the people whose items are on display in the museum. I'm a big believer in that. Like, I don't think that, the energy ever sort of goes away from something, that's why, like, I love, I have a few things in my house from my Yagapo that I'm like, it's like a piece of that ancestry that's always here. It's always around.
Yeah, absolutely. There is that energy. And even when, you know, the people that have donated or their families have donated and they come into the museum to see those pieces again, and that energy just is rejuvenated in those moments, right? They come and they're happy that it gets to be here, and that energy grows rather than being hidden in the closet. Or, I have things from my too that are just carefully folded in a plastic bin, put away in the closet, but here the energy gets to grow and it gets to be shared, and it's really a beautiful endeavor that exists here in New York.
Yeah. If people want to support the museum, how would they do that? How can they, and we'll put, links in the show notes and everything like that, but how can people support the initiatives or the museum itself?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll put all the links at the end, but we are open to the public by appointment at the moment. We are piloting open hours. So I'll give you the email address at the end, and we'd love to set up visits for individuals, for groups, for families. We can set up the visits. As I mentioned, we do the educational programming for children. We're happy to do a tour for a Philiptokos group if they wanted to join us, for a young adult group, for really, if a Greek dance troupe was doing dances from Epirus and they wanted to come to New York and see some of the costumes, we would love to put a program together for that. Really, the best way to support the museum is coming to visit the museum and experiencing what has been put together here, and then sharing that, inviting more people to come to the museum. We will be continuing to host events throughout the year into next year. So we'll make sure to share those as they become available as well. But really, the best way to support the museum is to come visit, because that's what it's here for.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Well, you all heard it here first. Maria, thank you so much for sharing with us and for just shedding a pinch of light on this really amazing space. And I'm so glad that you found them and they found you because I feel like just your approach to this and it's so heart centered that I think before you started, you were like, I just have to turn the lights on. And I'm like, the light is also coming from like you as a person being there. Like you can tell it's like so fulfilling. So I'm excited for you and I'm excited, to see how the museum continues to grow and, hopefully we'll be able to visit someday too.
Well, like I said, I'm just here as a steward to continue the work that has been set forth because really it's a beautiful space and a beautiful thing that has been created here in New York. So I just hope that the light shines further than our neighborhood and that more people get to come and experience this beautiful space. So thank you so much, Maria, for having me.
Of course.
Do hope to host you here at the museum. Please come visit next time you're in New York. We'd love to see you.
That would be amazing.